Alright, it's time. So you want to know my Captain America Civil War non-spoiler review? Well, I'm going to tell ya right now. First, let me get out of this tight-ass shirt real quick. Akasan'S honest review here. I'm trying out a new little thing. I've been meaning to do this review quite a few days ago, but I just wanted to try to set up something a little more professional than just me rambling in front of the camera and all that. So I found out some formats and how to do an official good video review. Let's go ahead and begin. Already messing it up. So for those of you that don't know, Captain America Civil War is essentially taking off a little bit after the Age of Ultron situations, the stories that were involved in there, but primarily the main focus is a lot of what came after Captain America 2, The Winter Soldier. It primarily has a lot of characters that involve a lot of events that happen concerning Bucky Barnes and Steve Rogers, aka Captain America's relationship. So Steve Rogers and Bucky Barnes and Tony Stark are all involved in this sort of three-way conflict issue that comes to a head midway through the movie or so, or towards the end of the first act, I believe. It's hero against hero, and it's a great sort of starting off point to phase 3 of the MCU. Now, obviously, with this year, the trailers were really good. There was a lot of hype getting into it. I had some great reactions. They showed Spider-Man in that particularly infamous trailer, and there was a lot of hype around this, but at the same time, there was a bit of a fear with the trailers watching them. I also kind of felt this might be the end of the superhero genre. This might be the last sort of hoorah of superhero type movies, because we might be on a bit of a superhero burnout. Just a few days ago we celebrated the 8th anniversary here of Iron Man being introduced, in a sense the MCU being introduced to audiences, and there was always this feeling, especially with previous movies that have come out earlier this year, that maybe we might be toward the end of the superhero movies, that maybe we were going to be coming up a bit stale and we were running out of ideas, and people, just the general audience, was not feeling it. I am happy to report that Civil War actually answers a lot of those questions and makes you wanting more after this particular movie. It completely was a game changer, and it really just left me in a state of shock, and I compared it to the same way, very, very similar, not as close, but very similar to the way I felt coming out of The Dark Knight. And I haven't felt that way in a long time. The way Civil War leaves you, I'm not going to say in this review because we're trying to keep it non-spoiler, but just the way the end of this movie leaves you, you really want to know more, and not in a bad way, not like Age of Ultron where it seemed like everything was a to be continued type of feeling. This one actually really left you a bit of an emotional wreck just based on the way everything ends up. And I think that's actually the beauty of this movie, is the fact that now with phase 3, you just don't know what's next. We can't look at this movie and be like, oh, okay, well, it's going to be continued in Black Panther's story. Well, this is going to be continued in Doctor Strange or whatever. Oh, okay, we'll find out about this later in another sequel. No, not at all. Like, now it's just like, I have no idea where the story is going to go. And especially, without spoiling anything, especially wondering what's going to happen with the Avengers in Avengers 3. Now, as I just kind of covered with talking about what I felt after the trailers, I do want to say my immediate feeling after this movie was just holy shit. Again, very close, but not as close to the feeling that I got when leaving TDK. I was very excited after the Dark Knight trilogy, and I thought Nolan and just what WB was doing was going to be the greatest thing on earth. And to this point, I still don't feel like any movie has really touched that sort of impression that TDK left me. But again, I am very biased given Batman is my number one sort of superhero here. However, with Civil War just immediately leaving, I just wanted to know more. I just wanted to go back and watch it again because I couldn't imagine that, especially with a Marvel type movie, that you could have so many plot elements, so many plot devices, and just such a nice sort of playthrough, just the segue, everything being put together, the path that everything was started on, and the way it ended was just flawless in a sense. There wasn't any sort of head scratching, and nothing was too simplistic. It's just that everything was given to you and not spoon-fed at all. Just everything was displayed to you beautifully. The only sort of nod, I guess, the only knock I could kind of give it was the music wasn't as sort of defining as someone like Hans Zimmerman or so. Hans Zimmer would have done in The Dark Knight. That's the only thing I guess I would say is that there wasn't any like memorable music so much. I mean, there was things in there that was a hint to the Avengers, a hint to Tony Stark, a hint to Iron Man, a hint to Captain America, but I just wanted to know more. I wanted to see it right. I wanted to see that movie again immediately after, the next day. I wanted to, if I had the time, if I had the money, I would have seen it, and I think a lot of people feel the same way. So you can guarantee there's going to be a lot of repeat viewings just because it was exciting. It wasn't a thing where you wanted to go back and see it again because you weren't sure or kind of unsure about if you liked it or not, so you need to see it again. I hate that feeling. I don't like that some movies are designed that way, that you need to go watch a movie again to decide if you like it. Fuck no. I wanted to see this movie again because I enjoyed it, and I wanted to see some of the classic airport scenes again. I wanted to see the dialogue. I just wanted to see the way the characters interacted with each other, and I just watched it a second time a couple days ago, and it was just the same feeling. I saw it with great sound as well. Was great. I don't recommend IMAX 3D for me personally, and I don't because I feel like a lot of the fight scenes were done great fight scenes, but it was done a disservice in IMAX 3D. Unfortunately, in Japan, if you want to see it with English voices, Japanese subtitles, and in IMAX, 3D is the only case you're going to get. I believe they might have some showings for IMAX 2D, but you're going to get the Japanese voices, and who the hell would want to see it like that? So the characters, which ones were interesting, which was well-rounded, one-sided, some of the best ones? Well, for instance, the most interesting characters coming out of this was definitely the introduction of Black Panther and Spider-Man. Both of them were in very different situations, were handled very well. Black Panther was like a no bullshit type of character, and I really liked that. He kind of took on this sort of badass vigilante sort of feeling, and like no bullshit, no time for jokes. Whereas Spider-Man, the introduction of this new Spider-Man was completely the opposite, but was done just as well. You definitely felt the great power, great responsibility side. They didn't have to hammer it in either. You felt that Peter Parker had a duty to perform here, and he was just basically a kid trying to get by at the same time. So I really like the way both Peter Parker was introduced, and T'Challa as well. The duty that T'Challa has to face in becoming the Black Panther was great, well-rounded, and honestly, between the two of these characters in the movies coming up here, I'm more interested to actually see a Black Panther movie rather than a Spider-Man movie, and I think that's a great thing. I think that's a great idea. A great feeling for diversity, because I'm not the only one that actually seems to be more interested in seeing more about Black Panther. I think it's great. Who in their right mind would imagine anybody being interested in seeing a Black Panther movie, or a Doctor Strange movie for that matter. It's crazy. Guardians of the Galaxy, right? It's just, that's the really interesting part about what Marvel does and the way they do it in bringing these new characters out and bringing classic characters into the MCU that I felt really stood out. Now, this is definitely a Captain America movie, so obviously, the focus here is on Steve Rogers and Captain America, and the performance that Chris Evans gives, I think, is very good. In the case of the character he's playing, there are a lot of hints of the classic Captain America, but there's also the mixed in Ultimates Captain America as well, and there's just, as always, as we've always seen, the Marvel MCU has always kind of been a mix of the Ultimate line, the 616 line, and I think Chris Evans' performance is, every movie is getting more and more into the kind of Captain America that I know of, like the leader type. I felt a lot of that in actually Age of Ultron. Regardless of how you feel about that movie, I personally thought it was a great team movie. Focusing on just the team aspects, I felt that Chris Evans really was a leader here. And in this movie, I thought he nailed it perfectly as someone who was still willing to risk everything for his best friend, but not forget about his teammates as well, his Avengers, basically. Robert Downey Jr. was there. He was perfect. Admittedly, I'm actually not a big fan of the Iron Man standalone movies. For some reason, I thought the first one was okay. I really liked the performance, but just overall, I just felt like it was okay. I actually, of all the movies, I liked number 2, Iron Man 2. Of all the Iron Man movies, I liked Iron Man 2 the most, out of all of them, because I felt like it was the most balanced Tony Stark and Iron Man sort of movie we got, where I felt like the other ones were maybe a little too much this or a little too much of that. Iron Man 3 wasn't a big fan of. Watching it again, I thought it was okay, but I felt like the humor that Robert Downey Jr. brought and the character of Tony Stark brought was kind of done in a better form in this fashion, this movie, and I think everybody else just, there was enough screen time for every other character. I thought it's, again, looking back at this movie, it is amazing in a sense that they did the Avengers. They took care of the Avengers characters better than the Avengers movies in some point in time here. And that is a crazy sort of accomplishment to have. I felt like nobody didn't get enough screen time. I think everybody shared as much screen time as they needed to, and every line that everyone was had was delivered perfectly. My personal favorite line was actually the interaction between Hawkeye and Black Panther, because it worked very well. Like, again, Black Panther was kind of the answer to Marvel has too many jokes type feeling. Like, that's why I'm totally ready for this Black Panther movie to see what's up. And if you don't agree with me, I don't care. Let's go. I think really the main thing that stood out about Civil War was just the fact that this wasn't trying to be an Avengers movie. It was definitely still being a Captain America movie, but it really the pacing was just done so well that you would always remember it's about Captain America, but it wasn't always focused on him all the time, even though the goal was Captain America's story focused here, okay? Without spoiling anything, I just felt like that was really, they honed in on perfectly. It goes from a Captain America movie to an Avengers movie midway through, especially with the airport scene. But then once all that's said and done, it's back to being a Captain America movie. But overall, I mean, it's still, I think the great part is you do see the conflicting issues between Tony and Steve Rogers, in the sense that they both have ideals of what the Avengers is supposed to be, and both of them want what's best for the Avengers, wants what's best for themselves, but they also know there's a hint of the position they're taking. They have doubt in the position that they're taking. I think that's one of the things that stand out the most is throughout the entire movie. It's not like you can be like, well, fuck Tony Stark, I'm not going to do this. At times, you may not like what he wants to do or what he's trying, but you can understand that he's trying to do this for the good of the team, which also has hints of selfishness. At the same time, you can also see through Chris Evans and through his performance through Captain America and Steve Rogers that there's problems, there's a bit of selfishness in the path that Steve Rogers is taking. That's what is so crazy, and I can sit here and actually debate this for like 15-20 minutes, or we could have a roundtable discussion on who was really right or wrong, but in the end of this movie, there really wasn't a right or wrong, and that's what's so good about this movie. And I understand why people are saying this very well might be the best comic book movie ever, aside from The Dark Knight. So finally, guys, if you really want to know if I'm going to recommend this movie to you or not, fuck yes. I recommend watching this movie. I don't recommend it in IMAX 3D. I'm very particular about the technicalities of the way movies are filmed and such, and make sure you go to the movie theater with the best FPS, high frame rate sort of projection. There's a lot of things that I think the Russo brothers, just like Christopher Nolan, ironically, there's a lot of things that the Russo brothers do with their directing and their camera work and the cinematography that I feel that some movie theaters they're not ready for fully. So if you can, I recommend probably IMAX 2D if you can, if they have that, and the Red Dreaded Nation below can probably tell you where they're from and what kind of movie theater they went to go see it in and how they felt it was. I don't recommend 3D at all just because of that shaky cam sort of style for some of those fight scenes already. I went back and I watched The Winter Soldier right after the first time I watched Civil War. I went back to watch Winter Soldier, and that was the first time I watched it on a smaller screen on Blu-ray. And there's fight scenes, just the way that it's filmed with the shaky cam. Sometimes there's kind of like jumping images, and it works really well when you have a nice screen on Blu-ray. But I think when you're putting on the 3D, you get this extra kind of like ghosting image, which I can't recommend at all. So I went back and I watched it on Dolby Atmos, which is like really nice. It's an extra big screen, but the sound is done really well. Every punch, everything that was thrown, the sound was perfect. When I saw it the first time in IMAX 3D, the sound was like, what the fuck? I was like Grandpa Simpson, like, turn it up! Turn it up! I couldn't hear shit. Like, it was really frustrating. I came out of there and it was hot because in Japan they don't have air conditioning during the movies for whatever reason. And I was hot, I got a migraine, and it was frustrating. But the second time I saw it was just, it sounded so good. So I personally, on the technical side, I recommend just watching this movie in a place that is well known for its sound. That's generally why I pick IMAX to begin with, because of its sound. Check it out that way. 2D if you want, but definitely sound would be the best preference. Screen quality after that. I think you're gonna really enjoy it. Definitely don't wait to rent this movie. I will say though that there are things that I'll cover in my spoiler review a lot more in terms of the implications of the MCU later. But I don't think you should wait for a rental if you're concerned about those implications. And I also feel that if you read like these spoiler comments and kind of getting the full sort of review, I don't think it'll necessarily ruin this sort of movie, but I also think if you're kind of susceptible to cynicism and such, that if somebody, there's no way to actually spoil this in one line. And sometimes trolls will try to express their disappointment with the movie, which I'll cover more in my spoiler review about what happens and what doesn't happen. But in the end, I think if you're a big fan of the MCU, of course, I think you do yourself a disservice not to watch this movie, because believe me when I say this, the entire game has changed in the MCU, and that's what's the beautiful part about this civil war. In war, there are always expectations of things that will happen, right? People will die, sides will change, but like any sort of war, you never fully shake it off, and I think that's exactly what this movie accomplished. And is a lot of things happened in this movie, and no character was left unscathed, and everybody is going to be feeling this into the future movies, and I can't wait to see what's next. Guys, my name is Akasan. I hope you enjoyed this non-spoiler review. I might just go ahead and record a spoiler review after this, but let me know what you think about it, and I think I'll be on YouNow a little later tomorrow if you guys want to just chat about this movie. America just got this movie out right now, and I'm sure you guys really want to talk about it, so stay tuned for details on that, okay? Make sure you subscribe to my Twitter, my YouNow, everything, guys. Hit that like button, gets us trending. I enjoy doing this review, and I hope I can do more on movies I like. When I don't like a movie, it's really hard for me to talk about it, but when I really like a movie, I can go on. I can I can do this all day. Take care, guys. I'm out.
Alright, I've run out of patience. On the roof! Hey, everyone.
I can do this all day.